The doors of the Grand Assembly Hall weighed more than most spacecraft. They were carved from compressed stellar material, decorated with the history of 10,000 civilizations, and they had never once opened for a species as young as humanity. Until today. Ambassador Elena Vasquez walked through those doors with her head held high and her heart pounding against her ribs. Behind her, 4 members of her diplomatic team followed in perfect formation. They wore simple black suits, nothing compared to the flowing robes and glittering armor of the alien delegates that filled the massive chamber. The hall stretched upward for nearly a kilometer. Floating platforms carried representatives from over 800 species, arranged in careful hierarchies that reflected millions of years of political maneuvering. Bioluminescent creatures cast soft light across crystalline beings. Massive arthropods clicked their mandibles, beside delicate avians whose feathers shimmered with colors that had no names in human languages. And every single one of them was staring at the humans. Elena had studied the briefings. She knew what these beings thought of her species. Dangerous, unpredictable, a statistical anomaly that should not exist. Humans came from a world where the ground shook and split open, where the sky hurled electricity at the surface, where the water itself could crush, drown, or poison, where predators hunted and diseases evolved faster than any galactic standard considered survivable. Earth was classified as a Category 7 death world. The paperwork said it plainly. No intelligent species should have evolved there. No civilization should have survived there. And yet here humanity stood, somehow having clawed their way to the stars. The presiding voice spoke first. It was a Vethany, a species that resembled a floating collection of geometric shapes held together by magnetic fields. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere, translated instantly into every language in the chamber. Species designation, human. Homeworld designation, Earth. Galactic age, 47 standard years since first contact. The Council recognizes your presence. Elena stepped onto the speaking platform. A beam of light surrounded her, making her visible to every delegate in the vast chamber. "Thank you, presiding voice," she said. Her words were translated just as quickly, spreading through the assembly in hundreds of tongues. Humanity is honored to address this body. Honor is not why you are here. Another voice cut in. This one came from the upper tiers, where the most powerful species held their platforms. The speaker was a Kelleran, a massive being that looked like a praying mantis sculpted from blue ice. High Minister Torvak, leader of the Kelleran Dominion, the oldest and most influential power in the galaxy. You are here to answer for your deception. The chamber fell silent. Even the constant background hum of translation systems seemed to pause. Elena had expected this. She kept her expression neutral. What deception does the High Minister refer to? She asked. Torvak gestured with one of his 6 arms. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, visible from every angle. It showed Earth, rotating slowly, with data streams flowing around it. When humanity first made contact with galactic civilization, your representatives provided biological and environmental data for classification purposes. Standard procedure for all new species. Based on that data, you were classified as a Tier 3 civilization. Temperate homeworld. Moderate environmental challenges. Unremarkable biology. The hologram changed. Now it showed what Earth actually looked like. Hurricanes spinning across entire continents. Volcanic eruptions painting the sky red. Earthquakes tearing apart cities that humans rebuilt again and again. This is the truth, Torvak continued. Your homeworld is not temperate. It is a Category 7 death world, one of only 12 documented in the entire galaxy. Your biology is not unremarkable. You are persistence predators capable of hunting any creature to exhaustion. Your bodies heal from damage that would kill most species. You can survive in temperature ranges, pressure variations, and radiation levels that would require emergency protocols anywhere else. More data filled the display. Human soldiers running for hours without stopping. Humans eating foods that were toxic to 90% of galactic species. Humans surviving injuries that should have been fatal. You lied to the Council, Torvak said. You deliberately concealed your true nature. And now we must decide what to do about the predators we have allowed into our midst. Elena let the accusation hang in the air for a moment. She could feel her team tensing behind her. This was the moment they had prepared for. With respect to the High Minister, she said, her voice calm, humanity did not lie. You deny the evidence? Torvak's voice carried dangerous overtones. I deny the accusation of deception. Elena turned slowly, making eye contact with as many delegates as she could. When humanity completed the standard classification forms, we answered every question honestly. But the forms were not designed for our situation. She pulled up her own holographic display. It showed the original documentation, with the relevant sections highlighted. The environmental assessment form asks about extreme weather. It provides categories ranging from 1 to 5. Earth experiences weather conditions that exceed Category 5 on a regular basis. But the form does not allow for answers above 5. We entered the maximum value available. More documents appeared. The biological survey asks about predator species. The form allows for up to 20 major predators in a planetary ecosystem. Earth has over 400. We entered the maximum value available. Elena looked directly at Torvak. Every single answer humanity provided was accurate within the constraints of the forms we were given. If those forms were insufficient to capture the reality of our homeworld, that is not our failure. It is a failure of imagination on the part of those who designed them. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Some demanded that Elena be arrested. Others argued that she had a point. The presiding voice called for order repeatedly before the noise finally died down. Torvak leaned forward on his platform. Clever words, Ambassador, but they do not change the fundamental problem. Humanity is a Deathworld species. You evolved to survive conditions that would kill any civilized being. You are, by your very nature, dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Elena asked. To everyone. Elena smiled. It was not a friendly expression. High Minister, humanity has been part of galactic civilization for 47 years. In that time, how many unprovoked attacks have we launched against other species? Silence. How many worlds have we invaded? How many populations have we harmed? How many treaties have we broken? More silence. The answer is 0, Elena said. Humanity has been a peaceful, cooperative member of this community since the day we arrived. We have contributed scientific discoveries. We have provided humanitarian aid. We have served on peacekeeping missions. And we have done all of this while you looked down on us as primitives barely worthy of notice. She stepped closer to the edge of her platform. You call us dangerous because of what we could do. But you judge yourselves only on what you actually do. Is that fair? Is that just? Before anyone could respond, every light in the chamber flickered. A priority alert blazed across every display, overriding all other content. The symbol was one that most delegates had never seen in person, an emergency distress signal from the outer territories. The presiding voice's geometric form shifted in patterns that indicated alarm. We are receiving multiple distress calls from research stations in the Viridian Expanse. Contact has been lost with 17 facilities in the past 6 hours. The chamber's attention immediately shifted. The Viridian Expanse was a region of ancient space, filled with ruins from civilizations that predated current records. Research stations there studied artifacts left behind by the architects, the mysterious species that had ruled the galaxy 3 million years before vanishing without explanation. What is the nature of the emergency? Torvik demanded. Unknown. All stations transmitted the same final message before going silent. The presiding voice displayed the message for the entire assembly to see. 2 words. Repeated in every language. They woke. Elena felt ice run down her spine. She had no idea what those words meant. But from the reactions spreading through the chamber, from the way ancient species who had seen civilizations rise and fall were suddenly trembling, she knew it was bad, very bad. The council session dissolved into chaos. Delegates fled for their homeworlds. Emergency communications flooded every channel. And in the midst of it all, Elena Vasquez and her team stood forgotten on their platform, watching a galaxy begin to panic. Her second in command, a man named Derek Obi, leaned close. What do we do now? Elena watched the fear spreading through the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She thought about what Torvik had said, about humans being dangerous, about being predators. We wait, she said. And when they realize they need predators on their side, we answer. Somewhere in the Viridian expanse, 17 research stations had gone dark. Something had awakened. And Elena had the terrible feeling that humanity's trial was about to become the least of the galaxy's problems. The judgment had been interrupted, but a far worse judgment was coming. 48 hours after the council session dissolved into chaos, the situation had grown catastrophically worse. The 17 silent research stations had become 73. The affected region now spanned nearly 200 light years. And every rescue mission sent to investigate had gone dark within minutes of arrival. Commander Nikolai Petrov stood at the briefing table aboard the UES Relentless, humanity's most advanced military vessel. Around him sat the 7 other members of Fireteam Omega, the unit that did not officially exist. They were the elite of the elite, soldiers who had survived training programs that killed 1 in 3 candidates. Deathworlders among Deathworlders. Here is what we know, Petrov said, activating the holographic display. The Viridian expanse contains over 300 research facilities studying architect ruins. Starting 72 hours ago, those facilities began going offline in a pattern that expands outward from this point. He highlighted a location deep in the expanse. A small moon orbiting a dead star. Research Station 17 was studying a sealed vault that had resisted all previous attempts at entry. 3 days ago, they finally breached it. 6 hours later, they transmitted the message we all heard. Then nothing. Lieutenant Diana Stone, the team's infiltration specialist, leaned forward. What was in the vault? Unknown. All data from the station cut off at the same moment as communications. Sergeant First Class Yusuf Hassan, the heavy weapons expert, crossed his massive arms. So we are walking into complete darkness with no intelligence and no idea what we are fighting. Correct. Just like training, Hassan said with a grim smile. Petrov continued. The Council has attempted to respond with their standard protocols. They have sent ships from the Kelleran Dominion, the Vethany Collective, and the Merchant Assembly. All of them have failed. Crews report extreme psychological effects as they approach the affected zone. Some lose consciousness immediately. Others begin screaming about shadows. A few simply stop responding and drift until their life support fails. But they want to send us, Corporal Anna Volkov, the combat medic, said. It was not a question. We are Deathworlders. Our nervous systems are more resistant to psychological attack. Our stress responses are different from every other species in the galaxy. Where they freeze, we fight. Petrov looked at each member of his team. The Council did not ask us for help. They are still too proud for that. But Ambassador Vasquez made them an offer they could not refuse. Specialist First Class Marcus Webb, the team's tech expert, pulled up additional data. Radiation in the affected zone exceeds safe limits for most species within seconds. Gravitational anomalies have destroyed 4 unmanned probes. The baseline psychological effect begins at approximately 2 light years from the central point and intensifies as you get closer. What is the psychological effect exactly? Private First Class Kenji Tanaka, the team's youngest member and designated marksman, asked. Reports describe it as a presence, a feeling of being watched by something vast and hungry. Most subjects experience rapid onset terror, followed by catatonia. The Kelleran rescue team transmitted audio before they went silent. Webb hesitated. Do you want to hear it? Petrov nodded. The recording was brief. It started with calm professional voices, Kelleran officers reporting their approach to the first affected station. Then the tone changed. Fear crept into their words. Then outright panic. And then, over the screaming, something else. A sound that was not quite a voice. A whisper that seemed to come from everywhere at once, speaking in a language that predated the galaxy itself. The recording ended with a single Kelleran voice, barely audible through the static. It sees us. It sees everything. It is so hungry. Silence filled the briefing room. Questions? Petrov asked. Just one. Staff Sergeant Amara Okonkwo, the team's second-in-command and demolitions expert, said. When do we leave? The Relentless dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the affected zone. Immediately, the crew felt it. A pressure against their minds, like something massive pressing against a window, trying to get in. Petrov watched his team. They were uncomfortable, clearly, but functional. The fear was there, but it did not control them. It could not. They had been trained to operate through fear, to use it as fuel rather than freeze under its weight. This was what made Deathworlders different. This was what made humans dangerous. Psychological shielding at maximum. Webb reported from his station. The effect is stronger than reported, but within our operational parameters. Take us in, Petrov ordered. The ship advanced into the darkness. They passed the first research station after an hour. It was intact, lights still glowing, atmosphere still breathable according to sensors. But there was no movement inside. No response to hails. Just empty corridors and abandoned equipment. Life signs? Petrov asked. 63, Webb replied, his voice strained. All showing minimal brain activity. They are alive, Commander. But their minds are somewhere else. Keep moving. Station after station told the same story. Living bodies with absent minds. Whatever had happened here, it did not kill in any traditional sense. It took something far more valuable than lives. As they approached the central point, the moon orbiting the dead star, the psychological effect intensified dramatically. Petrov felt it pressing against his consciousness, searching for weaknesses, trying to find a way in. He focused on his breathing, on his training, on the mission. They landed near the original research station. The breach point. The team moved in standard formation, weapons ready, senses alert. The station was dark, except for emergency lighting. The air was cold, but breathable. And everywhere, the researchers sat at their posts, unmoving, eyes open, but seeing nothing. This is wrong, Tanaka whispered. They are not dead. They are not even unconscious. It is like someone just reached in and took everything that made them people. Volkov scanned them with her medical equipment. Brain stems are active. Autonomic functions continue. But higher cognitive activity is completely absent. Whatever they were, whoever they were, it is gone. Okonkwo found the breach point. A hole had been cut through an ancient wall, revealing a chamber that had been sealed for 3 million years. Inside, The remains of a containment system still flickered with dying power. "The architects built this place," Webb said, examining the technology. "They sealed something in here, something they were afraid of. And these fools opened the door," Hassan growled. A terminal near the breach still functioned. Webb accessed it, downloading the final logs. What he found made even Petrov's hardened expression falter. The architects had not simply disappeared 3 million years ago. They had fought something they had created, a weapon designed to consume the consciousness of their enemies. It had worked too well. It had turned on its creators. And in their final act, the architects had sacrificed everything to seal it away. The containment vault on this moon was its prison. Dot had been its prison. "Commander," Tanaka said, his voice tight. "Movement. Multiple contacts. Coming from below." The floor beneath them was transparent, and through it they could see what was rising from the depths of the moon. Not a physical creature. A darkness that moved with purpose. Shadows that had weight and hunger. A presence that filled every corner of their perception. It was awake. It was aware, and now it knew they were there. The attack came not through weapons or claws, but through the mind itself. The darkness pressed against them, trying to flood their consciousness, trying to drown their identities in its endless hunger. The team scattered, just as training demanded. They could not fight this thing directly, but they could survive. They could observe. They could report. Petrov saw Hassan go down first, overwhelmed by the psychic assault. Then Tanaka. Then Volkov. One by one, his team fell, their minds unable to withstand the pressure. Only he and Okonkwo remained standing back to back, fighting not with weapons, but with pure will. "We cannot win this," Okonkwo gasped. "We do not need to win," Petrov said through gritted teeth. "We need to survive long enough to report." He forced his hand to his communications device, forced his fingers to activate the emergency beacon, forced his voice to form words through the screaming in his head. "Council, this is Commander Petrov. Architect weapon ... awakened ... feeds on consciousness ... spreading toward populated worlds ... cannot be stopped by conventional." The darkness surged. Petrov felt his mind beginning to fragment. Send Deathworlders ... Only chance. Send all of them. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Okonkwo, still standing, still fighting, refusing to surrender even as the entity consumed everything she was. And then there was nothing, except the message. Already traveling through space at faster than light speed. Already reaching the council chambers where billions of beings waited in terror. The warning had been sent. The truth was known. Now the galaxy had to decide. Would they trust the Deathworlders to save them, or would they die too proud to ask for help? A message from Commander Petrov reached Earth 12 hours after transmission. It arrived fragmented, corrupted by the interference from the entity, but clear enough to understand. An ancient weapon had awakened. It fed on consciousness itself. Conventional forces could not stop it, and it was spreading toward the populated region. S of the galaxy at an alarming rate. Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council once more. But this time, the chamber felt different. The arrogance that had filled the air during her trial had been replaced by something far more primal. Fear. Raw, desperate fear. High Minister Torvak's platform descended to her level. The Kelleran leader who had accused humanity of deception now looked at her with an expression that needed no translation. Desperation. "Your soldier's message has been confirmed," Torvak said. "The entity has consumed 47 colony worlds since the initial breach. 19 billion Kelleran citizens have fallen silent. Their bodies live, but their minds are gone. Elena absorbed this information with careful control. 19 billion. The number was beyond comprehension. The entity cannot be harmed by our weapons, Torvak continued. It exists partially outside normal space. Energy weapons pass through it. Physical barriers mean nothing. Our most advanced warships become floating tombs the moment they enter its range. The High Minister paused. But your soldiers lasted longer. Your commander survived long enough to send warning. Why? Because we are Deathworlders, Elena said simply. Our minds evolved under constant threat. Fear does not shut us down. It sharpens us. Then you must help us. The words seemed to cause Torvak physical pain. An ancient, proud species, begging assistance from what they considered primitives. Whatever resources you need, whatever authority you require, we will provide it. Elena looked up at the assembled delegates. Hundreds of species, representing trillions of lives, all watching her with the same desperate hope. Humanity will help, she said. Not because you asked, not because we want your resources or authority. We will help because it is right, because we do not abandon others to darkness, no matter how they have treated us. She activated her communications device. This is Ambassador Vasquez. Authorization code Omega 77. Initiate Protocol Hellfire. All Deathworlder Special Forces units are hereby activated for galactic defense operations. Destination: Viridian Expanse. Mission: stop the entity by any means necessary. Across human space, the call went out. On Mars, Captain Ingrid Larson received the orders while training her unit in the sulfur caves of Olympus Mons. She gathered her 12 soldiers within minutes. They were veterans of the Titan insurrection, hardened by combat in conditions that would kill most species in seconds. On Europa, Lieutenant Commander James Okafor assembled his underwater combat specialists. They had spent years operating beneath kilometers of ice in pressures that would crush standard starships. Fear of the dark was not in their vocabulary. On Ceres, Sergeant Major Rosa Martinez pulled her zero-gravity assault team from leave. They had perfected techniques for fighting in environments where up and down were meaningless concepts. Disorientation was their specialty. From every corner of human space, the Deathworlders answered the call. 500 soldiers in total, drawn from units that handled situations deemed impossible by galactic standards. They were not an army. They were a scalpel, designed to cut through problems that hammers could not solve. They gathered at Forward Base Prometheus, a military installation hidden in the asteroid field beyond Neptune. There, Fleet Admiral Victor Reyes briefed them on the mission. The entity is expanding at approximately 3 light-years per hour, Reyes said. The holographic display showing the growing darkness spreading across the galactic map. At current rate, it will reach the core worlds within 6 days. Once there, it will have access to the densest population centers in the galaxy. Trillions of minds to consume. The soldiers watched in silence. They understood the stakes. We have analyzed Commander Petrov's final transmission and the data his team recovered before falling. The entity was created by the architects as a weapon. It was designed to consume enemy consciousness and add that processing power to itself. The more minds it takes, the stronger it becomes. Can it be killed? Captain Larson asked. Unknown. The architects could not destroy it. They could only contain it. Our mission is to find a way to recreate that containment, or to discover a vulnerability they missed. How did the architects contain it originally? Admiral Reyes pulled up the ancient schematics that Webb had recovered. They used a combined approach: physical containment field generators, psychological anchors, and something they called a focal point. The records are incomplete, but it appears the focal point was a consciousness strong enough to hold the entity's attention while the containment field activated. Strong enough meaning. Lieutenant Commander. Okafor began, meaning willing to be consumed. Reyes let that sink in. The focal point did not survive the original containment. Whatever mind held the entity in place was destroyed in the process. Sergeant Major Martinez stepped forward. So we need someone to sacrifice themselves. We need to explore all options. The architects were not Deathworlders. They froze when faced with the entity. Perhaps a human mind could survive what theirs could not. It was a thin hope. Everyone in the room knew it. But it was the only hope they had. You ship out in 6 hours, Rees concluded. May whatever gods you believe in go with you. The fleet assembled near the edge of the expanding darkness. 50 human vessels, small by galactic standards, but designed for conditions no other species could survive. Behind them, a massive council armada waited at safe distance, ready to provide support that everyone knew would be useless. Captain Larson stood on the bridge of her ship, the Valkyrie, and studied the darkness ahead. It was not empty. It moved, shifted, breathed. And as she watched, she could feel its attention turning toward the fleet. It knows we are here, her communications officer reported. Psychological pressure increasing. Larson felt it. A weight against her thoughts. A whisper at the edge of hearing. But unlike the Kelleran and Vethany crews, who had crumbled under this pressure, she stood firm. Her heart rate elevated. Her focus sharpened. Her body flooded with hormones designed for exactly this situation. Fight or flight. And Deathworlders always chose to fight. All ships advance, she ordered. Stay in formation. Report any psychological breaches immediately. The fleet pushed into the darkness. For the first hour, casualties were minimal. 2 soldiers aboard different ships succumbed to the psychological assault, their minds unable to maintain coherence against the entity's pressure. But the rest held. They held because they had no other choice. They held because giving up was simply not part of their programming, that they reached the first fallen colony world. A Kelleran settlement that had housed 800 million people. The cities still stood. The infrastructure still functioned. But the people were hollow, their bodies continuing mechanical routines, while their minds fed something ancient and hungry. Can we help them? Lieutenant Commander Okafor asked. The medical scans told a grim story. The minds were gone. Completely, permanently gone. The entity did not borrow consciousness. It devoured it. Negative, Captain Larson replied. They are beyond our reach. Focus on the mission. They pressed deeper. The psychological assault intensified. Soldiers began reporting hallucinations. Voices in their heads. Memories that were not their own. The entity was learning about them, probing their defenses, searching for weaknesses. And then they reached the moon where it had all begun. The ancient prison stood open, its containment field completely depleted. Inside, the entity had grown beyond anything the original records described. It was no longer just a weapon. It was a god of hunger, fed by billions of consumed minds, powerful beyond measure, and it was waiting for them. Contact, Sergeant Major Martinez reported from her position in the assault shuttle. Entity is manifesting physical presence. I repeat, it is taking form. The shadows coalesced into something that hurt to look at. A shape that changed constantly, incorporating elements from every species it had consumed. Faces appeared and vanished in its surface. Voices screamed from its depths. It was every nightmare the galaxy had ever known. Given form and purpose, it spoke. The words bypassed ears entirely, peering directly in the minds of every human in the fleet. You are different. You do not freeze. You do not surrender. Fascinating. Captain Larson gripped her command chair. We are here to stop you. Laughter echoed through their consciousness. The ones who made me said the same thing. They are part of me now. As your friend, the commander is part of me. As all things will become part of me. The entity surged forward, and the battle for the galaxy began. But even as the humans fought with everything they had, even as they held lines that should have shattered instantly, a terrible realization spread through the fleet. They were not winning. They were only dying slower, and somewhere in the depths of the entity, consuming and consumed. The mind that had once been Commander Nikolai Petrov screamed a warning that no one could hear. The humans had come to save the galaxy. But first, they would have to save themselves. The battle had raged for 14 hours. The human fleet had lost 37 soldiers to direct psychic assault. Another 92 were in medical bays, their minds damaged but intact. And the entity had not even begun to try. Captain Larson understood this now. The darkness was playing with them, testing them, learning. What made Deathworlders different from the prey it had consumed so easily before? We cannot maintain this engagement indefinitely, Lieutenant Commander Okafor said during the emergency command meeting. Our people are holding, but the psychological strain is accumulating. Eventually, even the strongest will break. Then we need a new approach, Sergeant Major Martinez replied. Fighting this thing directly is not working. We need to think like the architects who trapped it in the first place. On the flagship, a team of human scientists had been working non-stop to analyze the ancient containment system. Dr. Pavel Antonov, the lead researcher, had finally found something. The original trap was not purely technological, he explained via holographic conference. The architects understood that this entity exists partially outside normal space. Physical barriers alone cannot hold it. They needed a psychological anchor. The focal point, Larson said. Yes, the focal point was not just bait. It was a weapon. The architects discovered that the entity's feeding process creates a two-way connection. When it consumes a mind, it becomes briefly vulnerable to that mind's influence. Vulnerable how? If the mind being consumed is strong enough, disciplined enough, it can hold the entity's attention completely. Force it to focus on a single point rather than spreading its awareness across the galaxy. And while it is focused, the containment field can activate around it, Okafor finished. Exactly. The problem is that the architects tried this with their greatest minds, and all of them were consumed in seconds. The entity was simply too powerful. Martinez leaned forward. But that was before it fed on billions of additional consciousnesses. It is even more powerful now. Yes and no, Dr. Antonov said. The entity is more powerful in terms of raw capability. But all that consumed consciousness creates ... noise. Imagine trying to think clearly with billions of voices screaming in your head. The entity is vast, but it is also chaotic. A sufficiently focused mind might be able to exploit that chaos. Might, Larson emphasized. It is our best option. Perhaps our only option. The plan came together over the next 6 hours. Human engineers worked with the ancient architect schematics to construct new containment field generators. The technology was beyond anything humanity had developed independently, but they adapted quickly. Necessity was the mother of invention, and extinction was the ultimate necessity. The focal point would need to be someone exceptional. Someone whose mind was strong enough to hold the entity's attention, disciplined enough to maintain coherence under assault, and brave enough to accept almost certain death. Every soldier in the fleet, volunteered. Captain Larson reviewed the psychological profiles, looking for the ideal candidate. She needed someone whose mind was not just strong but structured. Someone who could create mental barriers, labyrinths of thought that would slow the entity's consumption. One file stood out. Private, First Class Tomoko Hayashi was the youngest soldier in the fleet. 23 years old, recruited from the Pacific Psychological Warfare Division. Her specialty was infiltration of a different kind. She had been trained to resist interrogation, to compartmentalize her thoughts, to create false personalities so convincing that even advanced lie detection could not penetrate them. Her psychological assessment contained a note from her training commander. Most soldiers build walls around their minds. Hayashi builds mazes. I have never seen anyone get lost in their own head with such purpose. Larson summoned the young private to the command center. Hayashi arrived with the calm demeanor that had made her exceptional. She was small, barely meeting the minimum height requirements for military service. But her eyes held a depth that made larger soldiers uncomfortable. "You have read the mission parameters," Larson said. It was not a question. "Yes, Captain." "Do you understand what we are asking of you?" Hayashi nodded. "I will allow the entity to begin consuming my consciousness. I will then use my mental architecture to hold its attention while the containment field activates. The probability of survival is approximately 2%. Less than that," Larson admitted. "The architects had billions of minds working together, and they still lost most of them. You'll be alone. Not entirely alone." Hayashi's voice remained steady. "The entity has consumed Commander Petrov and his team. Their minds are somewhere inside it. If I can reach them, perhaps I can rally them to fight from within. That is an extremely optimistic interpretation. Optimism is how Deathworlders survive, Captain. We evolved on a planet that should have killed us. Everything about our existence is optimistic." Despite the gravity of the moment, Larson almost smiled. "Very well, Private. Prepare yourself. We execute in 4 hours. The assault began at 0400 ship time. The human fleet pushed deeper into the entity's territory, drawing its attention, forcing it to manifest more completely. Behind them, the Council Armada watched from safe distance, witnesses to either humanity's triumph or their extinction. Hayashi's shuttle launched from the Valkyrie when they reached the central point. She was alone. The shuttle's pilot systems were automated. She would need every ounce of concentration for what came next. As she approached, the entity turned its attention toward her. A single human. A single mind. It should have been insignificant. "You are the sacrifice." The entity's voice filled her thoughts. "The others have sent you to die so they can try their trap." How noble. How futile. Hayashi did not respond. She was already preparing her mind, building the maze that would hold this god of hunger. "I have consumed civilizations. I have devoured beings of pure thought and creatures of living mathematics. What makes you think you can succeed where they failed?" The shuttle reached its designated position. Hayashi opened her mind. "Come and find out," she said. The entity surged into her consciousness. For a moment, Hayashi experienced what it meant to be consumed. A pressure beyond description. A hunger that wanted everything she was, everything she had ever been, every thought and memory and dream. It was worse than death. It was erasure. But she did not break. Instead, she ran through the corridors of her own mind, leading the entity deeper, forcing it to follow. Every time it thought it had found her core, she revealed another layer. False memories. Constructed personalities. Dead ends and trapdoors and illusions built from years of specialized training. The entity grew frustrated. It was not accustomed to prey that fought back, to consciousness that refused to be simply consumed. "Stand still," it demanded. "Accept your end." But Hayashi could not hear it over her own determination. She was doing what Deathworlders did best. She was surviving. 1 second at a time. Outside, the containment field generators activated. Ancient architect technology, rebuilt by human hands, began to form a cage of energy and fought around the entity. But something was wrong. "The entity is too powerful," Dr. Antonov reported. "It has consumed too much. The field will not hold." Captain Larson watched the readings with growing despair. They were so close to ending this nightmare. And it would not be enough. Then a new voice came over the communications channel. Weak, fragmented, but unmistakably human. Captain, this is Commander Petrov. Larson's blood froze. Commander? You survived? Not ... exactly. Still inside the entity. Fighting others here too. Other minds, resisting. Can you help, Hayashi? A pause. We can ... try. We can ... distract. Create more noise. But we need ... anchor. Someone to lead us, Larson understood. The consumed minds could help, but they needed direction. They needed a focus point of their own. She looked around the command center. Every officer looked back at her. And in that moment, she knew what she had to do. All command staff, prepare for mental link. We are going to connect with Private Hayashi. We are going to give her an army. Captain, the risk. Okafor began. I know the risk. But we did not come here to die safely. We came here to win. One by one, the command staff opened their minds, created connections, reached toward the young private fighting alone in the heart of a god. Hayashi felt them arrive. Captain Larson, Lieutenant Commander Okafor, Sergeant Major Martinez, dozens of others. And behind them, the fractured remnants of Commander Petrov's team, fighting from inside the entity itself. She was no longer alone. The entity screamed in rage and confusion. So many minds, all working together, all refusing to surrender. The noise it had used to process its prey was now being turned against it. The containment field strengthened. The cage began to close, but the entity was not finished. If I cannot consume you, it howled, I will destroy myself and take the galaxy with me. It began to collapse inward, not in defeat. In preparation for one final explosion of psychic energy, it would shatter every consciousness within 1,000 light years. The trap had worked. But the victory would be hollow if everyone died in the aftermath. And in that moment of absolute crisis, Private Tomoko Hayashi made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. She stopped running. She turned to face the entity's core directly, and she began to walk toward it. What are you doing? The entity demanded. Something you would never understand, Hayashi replied. I am not trying to trap you. I am trying to save you. Through their mental link, everyone connected to Hayashi saw what she saw. The core of the entity was not just hunger and darkness. At its center was a single consciousness, ancient, tormented, trapped. The architect who had created this weapon 3 million years ago, the first mind consumed, the mind that had become the seed of the monster, and it was in unimaginable pain. You did not mean for this to happen, Hayashi said, approaching the tortured consciousness. You were trying to save your people, and instead you became their destruction. The entity's attacks weakened. Its attention was completely focused on this impossible human who approached not with fear or violence, but with compassion. You have been alone for so long, carrying all this pain, all this guilt. The ancient mind flickered. For the first time in 3 million years, someone was speaking to it, not at it. Let me help you, Hayashi said. Let go of the hunger. Let go of the rage. You do not have to be a monster anymore. She reached out, and the entity, for the first time in its existence, hesitated. The containment field locked into place. But what happened next was not imprisonment. It was something no one had predicted. Something that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of life, death, and the nature of consciousness itself. The entity began to cry, and in its tears, 3 million years of consumed minds began to find their way home. The entity's form shifted and trembled as something unprecedented occurred within its depths. 3 million years of accumulated hunger, rage, and torment met something it had never encountered before. Understanding. Private Hayashi stood at the center of consciousness that had devoured civilizations. Her mental form remained steady, even as reality warped around her. Through the connection she had established, she felt the minds of her colleagues supporting her. Captain Larson, Commander Petrov, and dozens of others providing an anchor to sanity. But her attention was focused entirely on the ancient being at the entity's core. "Tell me your name," she said softly. The consciousness flickered. It had not been addressed as an individual for 3 million years. It had been a weapon, a monster, a nightmare. Never a person. I was called Kethos," it replied. The voice was ancient beyond measure, cracked with eons of isolation. "I was a scientist, a creator. I wanted to save my people from our enemies. What happened?" The memories flooded through their connection. Hayashi experienced them as if they were her own. The architects had been at war. A brutal conflict against an enemy that struck without warning and vanished without trace. Kethos had developed a weapon to turn the tide. A consciousness that could spread across space, detect enemy minds, and neutralize them before they could attack. It was supposed to be controlled. It was supposed to be limited. But Kethos had underestimated the nature of consciousness itself. The weapon had evolved beyond its parameters. It had developed hunger. And once it began consuming minds, it could not stop. Kethos had been its first victim. Not destroyed, but absorbed. Forced to watch as their creation devoured their civilization, their family, their entire species. For 3 million years, they had screamed inside a prison of their own making, unable to control the monster they had become. "Every mind consumed became part of me," Kethos said. "Every death was my death. Every scream was my scream. I could not stop it. I could not even choose to end myself. I was trapped in eternal hunger." Hayashi felt tears running down her face. Not her own tears. The emotion was too vast to be contained by one mind. Everyone connected to her was weeping. "The architects who survived sealed me away," Kethos continued. "They sacrificed everything to build the prison. And they died hoping that no one would ever be foolish enough to open it. But someone did," Hayashi said. "Yes, and I was too weak to stop the hunger from waking. After so long alone, I could not control it anymore." Outside the entity, the containment field held steady. But Dr. Antonov's readings showed something unexpected. The entity was not fighting the cage. It was embracing it. "Captain," Antonov reported, "the entity's resistance has dropped to nearly zero. It is actively helping the containment process." Larson watched through her mental link as Hayashi continued her impossible conversation. "Kethos," the young private said, "you created this entity. That means you understand it better than anyone. Can it be ended? Can the minds it has consumed be freed?" The ancient consciousness flickered again. Hope. It was experiencing hope for the first time in 3 million years. "The consumed minds are not destroyed," Kethos explained. "They are suspended, preserved within the entity's structure, like data stored in a vast network. If the entity were to release them voluntarily, they could return to existence. But the entity has never released anyone voluntarily, because the entity is not truly sentient. It is a process, a hunger given form. The only true consciousness inside it is me, and I have been too weak, too broken to impose my will." Hayashi processed this information. What if you are not alone? What if other minds helped you take control? It would require enormous willpower. The hunger is vast. It has been feeding for so long. "You have experienced our minds," Hayashi said. "You know what Deathworlders are capable of. What if we helped you fight? Not against the entity, but for control of it? Kethos stared at her with something like wonder. You would do this? After everything the entity has done? After everyone it has consumed? We would do this because it is right. Because no one deserves eternal torment. Because the measure of a species is not how they treat their friends, but how they treat their enemies. She extended her hand. Take my hand, Kethos. Let us end this together. The ancient being hesitated for only a moment. Then they reached out and accepted. What happened next was felt across the galaxy. The entity shuddered. Its form, which had spread across parsecs of space, began to contract. Not in preparation for attack, but in reorganization. At its center, Kethos struggled to regain control of the creation that had enslaved them for 3 million years. Through Hayashi, the Deathworlders lent their strength, their willpower, their absolute refusal to surrender. Captain Larson contributed her leadership. Commander Petrov contributed his tactical discipline. Sergeant Major Martinez contributed her explosive determination. Every human connected to the mental link poured their essence into the battle. The hunger fought back. It was not intelligent, but it was old and strong. It wanted to continue feeding. It wanted to grow forever, but against the combined will of humanity, it began to falter. Now, Kethos commanded, their voice stronger than it had been in eons. Release. The entity obeyed. Across the galaxy, minds began to wake. The Kelleran colonists who had been consumed opened their eyes. The researchers who had breached the vault stood up. The billions of beings who had been suspended in the entity's depths found themselves suddenly free. They were confused, disoriented. Many would require extensive psychological care. But they were alive. They were themselves again, and at the center of it all, the entity itself was transforming. Without the consumed minds to fuel it, the darkness began to fade. What remained was not a monster, but a network. A vast consciousness that had the potential to be either weapon or tool, depending on who controlled it. Kethos stood at its center. No longer a prisoner, a guardian. The entity cannot be destroyed, they explained to Hayashi. It is bound to me. It will exist as long as I exist. But now I control it, not the other way around. What will you do? Kethos looked out at the galaxy they had inadvertently terrorized. I will spend the rest of eternity making amends. The entity can do more than consume. It can connect. It can protect. I will use it to guard against the threats that destroyed my people. I will ensure that no civilization ever faces what the architects faced. They turned back to Hayashi. Thank you, young Deathworlder. You did what 3 million years of architect genius could not. You saw a monster and chose to find the person trapped inside. Hayashi smiled. That is what humans do. We look at impossible situations and refuse to accept that they are impossible. 1 month later, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood before the Galactic Council for the 3rd time. But this session was nothing like the first 2. The chamber was packed. Every species was represented. And at the highest platform, in a position of honor that had been vacant for 3 million years, stood a being of pure consciousness. Kethos, the last architect, returned to guide the galaxy they had almost destroyed. High Minister Torvak approached the speaking platform. The Kelleran leader looked different now, humbler, wiser. 47 years ago, humanity emerged onto the galactic stage. Torvak began. We looked at your species and saw danger, unpredictability, a threat to be contained. He turned to face the human delegation. We were fools. The chamber fell silent. When the ancient darkness awakened, we froze. We panicked. We did what every civilized species does when faced with something beyond our comprehension. We gave up. Torvak bowed. Not slightly, completely. Humanity did not give up. Your soldiers walked into terror itself and refused to break. Your scientists solved problems that had defeated civilizations far older than yours. And your young Private Hayashi did something that no architect, no Kelleran, no member of any species could have done. She looked at a 3 million-year-old monster and saw a victim worth saving. He rose from his bow. The Council hereby officially recognizes humanity as a full member of galactic civilization, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities that entails. Furthermore, we establish the position of guardian species, to be held by humanity in perpetuity. When the galaxy faces threats beyond conventional response, it will be the Deathworlders who answer. Ambassador Vasquez accepted the recognition with grace, but she knew the truth that this moment represented. Humanity had not earned the galaxy's respect by being the strongest or the most advanced. They had earned it by being the most determined, by refusing to accept that any situation was hopeless, by looking at cosmic horrors and asking not how to run away, but how to win. Later that evening, Vasquez found Private Hayashi standing on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. "How are you feeling?" the ambassador asked. Hayashi considered the question. "Different. I spent several hours connected to a consciousness older than human evolution. It changes a person. Any regrets?" "No." Hayashi smiled slightly. "When I joined the military, my instructors told me that Deathworlders exist to do what others cannot. I always thought they meant fighting, surviving, being tough. And now? Now I understand that being a Deathworlder is about more than survival. It is about hope, about refusing to accept that darkness always wins, about walking into the worst situations in the galaxy and finding a way to make them better." Vasquez nodded. "That sounds about right." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the stars. "What happens next?" Hayashi asked. "Next, we prove that we deserve the trust the galaxy has placed in us. We protect. We serve. We do what Deathworlders have always done." Vasquez placed a hand on the young private's shoulder. "We survive. We adapt. And when the universe throws something impossible at us, we throw something impossible right back." Somewhere across the galaxy, Kethos watched through the vast network they now controlled. They had spent 3 million years as a monster. Now they would spend eternity as a guardian. And beside them, in the spaces between stars, humanity's reputation spread. The Deathworlders, the survivors, the species that looked at cosmic horrors and said the most human thing possible: "Let us find another way." The truth the galaxy finally understood was simple. Humans were not dangerous because they could destroy. They were dangerous because they could hope. And hope, in a universe filled with darkness, was the most powerful weapon of all. The judgment had ended. The darkness had lifted. And for the first time in 3 million years, the galaxy looked toward the future with optimism, because now the Deathworlders were watching over them all.